We are building our fellow countries app. The UI for our fellow countries app, we spoke about it earlier, right? But our fellow countries app will be a table view. It will be a table view, and the UI for that table view will be very similar to this UI here. Okay, so the cell, today we're talking about custom cells. And our goal is to create a custom cell that resizes itself based on the height of its contents. The main element that will be doing the resizing of the cells is the country's description. So for example, the home of Afrobeat here is the description of the country. Based on the content, based on how many characters, how many lines this description has, it will grow. It will increase the height of the cell. Okay, so that is known as self-resizing cells. And we'll use a custom cell. We'll lay out our custom cell, and based on the height of the second label here, based on the contents of that second label, the cell height will grow. Okay, any questions before we start? So what we're doing, our custom table cell will have two labels and two images. The top right image will be for the flag, and the bottom, the bigger image here, will be for the country. So far, so good? Okay, so let's go ahead and lay that out. Let's lay this out. First of all, we need to drag in a table view. So we need to drag in a table view from our object library. So get a table view from our object library over to our scene. So drag in a table view, and we'll set the constraints for this table view. The constraints of the table view, we'll click on Add New Constraints. The constraints for the table view will be 0 to the top or 0 to the bottom of the navigation bar, 0 to the leading of our superview, 0 to the trailing of our superview, and 0 to the bottom of our superview. And we'll add 4 constraints. So those are the constraints for the table view. Right now, my table view has been constrained. Now I'll go over to my attributes inspector for my table view. I'm going over to the attributes inspector for my table view. Where it says prototype cells, I'll increase the number to 1. Right now we have 1 prototype cell. For our Game of Thrones, we'll have 2 prototype cells. One of the cell will be laid out to the left side, our image, and the next one will be laid out to the right. We're using the same basic cell. The same cell, the same custom cell we are creating, but 2 prototype cells, right? 2 prototype cells, 2 different identifiers. One identifier could be left cell, the other identifier could be right cell. But it's the same custom cell we use. Everybody with me? Right? So in your cell for row, that's where you do the logic for which one you want. Based on some modular operator, right? I could say mod operator. If it's even, do this. If it's odd, do that cell. Everybody with me? Cool. So again, you can have many prototype cells. For our example right now, we'll have 1 prototype cell. Great. I'll click on my cell. I'll go back to my attributes inspector. Where it says reuse identifier, I will put in lowercase c, country, cell, and I'll press enter. Make sure you have this identifier. If you do not have this identifier, your app will crash. When it comes to the cell for row app, your app will crash. Okay, great. Next up, click on your cell again, and let's go over our country cell class. So if you option click where it says country cell. Do we all see country cell? That's Swift. Option click on country cell, that's Swift. And here we have our custom cell, which we created earlier, right? So we have our custom cell. Let's just go over it. Our custom cell has four UI elements. So here we have 4 UI elements. Everybody has access to the country cell, right? We have 4 UI elements. One is country image. Second is country name. Then we have the description of the country, and we have the flag of the country. We went ahead, we overrode the layout subviews. Why did we override layout subviews? When we have information about the view, meaning we have the view's frame, we know what the size of the view is, that method gets called. When it knows the size of the views, it's about to lay the view on screen, that method gets called. So if we want to go ahead and make a circle with our image view, this is where we put our logic. Everybody with me? So where we put the logic in layout subviews. Again, this is an override function from the parent class, meaning the UI views class. So here we have country image dot layer. Layer is the CA layer on the image. Every view has a CA layer. At the top, you have your UI view. At the bottom of every view, you have what's known as a CA layer. We'll talk more about the CA layer later, but we need the CA layer here to get access to the corner radius. Without the corner radius, without we modifying the corner radius, we don't get a circle. On UI view, there's no property saying corner radius. Everybody with me? Right? So in order to make our image a circle, very similar to our UI here, we want to make this guy a circle. We have to say layer.radius. Right? It could be a button, it could be a UI image, view, right? Anything you want to, any view you want to make a circle, for example, you have to get access to its layer. Every UI view has a layer. So here we say UI view or country image view, that layer, get me your layer. On your layer, you have a property called corner radius. Corner radius takes in a CG float. So we need to pass in a CG float to it. Here we say corner radius equals to half the diameter or half the width of the image. With that value, we're able to make a circle. Everybody with me? Right? So here we're saying country image, frame. Every view has a frame, right? We'll talk more about frames later. Every view has a frame. Like, what's your frame? What's your frame? On your frame, you have a size property. The frame tells us where the view is. If you have a view, for example, at the top left corner of the device, the frame is 0, 0, the size of the view. And the size is a tuple, as we said. The size has a width, and the size has a height. Everybody with me? So we get access to the size of the image view, and on that, we get access to the width. That's all I'm interested in right now. I could do the width, or I could do the height. Both of them are equal. Both the width and the height of the image view is 100, right? So here we take 100 and we divide it by 2 in order to get the radius. We have a radius, we could draw a circle. Yes, sir? This entire line here returns a CG float. Cool? And CG stands for core graphics. Right? We'll talk more about core graphics later, but CG stands for core graphics. Core graphics is everything that draws on the screen. At the end of the day, it deals with core graphics. Right? That's the framework. That's Apple's framework for drawing. For drawing elements on screen, it's core graphics. Okay, cool. So here we have our configure cell, right? Configure cell basically takes in a country. It takes in the country from our table view cell for row at. We get a country, the country that was currently selected. We pass the country to this method. It uses this country to set up the UI for the cell, right? So we get a country, we call configure cell, it sets up the cell in cell for row. Everybody? Questions? Lilia, question? Okay. Any questions? So far, our custom cell, it has a configure cell method on it. We override in layout subviews to do more drawing here, and the drawing is the circle. Yes, sir? Yeah. No, it could just be 2. We just put 0.0 there to put emphasis on it's a float, but you could simply put 2.0. I mean 2, just 2 without the 0.0. This would also work, okay? Because size.width itself is a CG float. Cool? Good question. Okay, so let's continue. Any questions with our custom cell class? Again, the minute you create a custom cell class or the minute you start dragging elements to your storyboard, you need a custom cell class for it, okay? To manage that view. Yes?
So configure,
the configure cell.
takes in the stuff that is the country, and that is in the country class, and then it basically just edits all the properties using the dot syntax or whatever.
Yes. So basically, the only function of our configure cell is to set up the UI elements of the cell using the country instance in cell for row. So every time cell for row gets called, this method gets called. The country instance we get back in the country instance is here. So in our cell for row, right, we have an instance, cell for row. We have an instance, where is it? Here, right here, on line 57. So this is coming from the array of countries, right? We have an array of countries. We access it via index path section, index path row, because array of arrays. It returns us a country, and we pass the country to our configure cell function. Cool? So Mr. One's question was about cell for row. Where does it come from? Not cell for row, but how do we get the instance of country and pass it to configure cell? It's in configure cell, right? And where do we get country? We get it from our array of continents. Okay? Luba, questions? Okay, cool. So we've overviewed. Let's go ahead and continue with our UI. So go back to storyboard. We are going back to storyboard. Okay, so let's set up our cell. So again, custom cell, whatever we do as far as expanding the size of this cell here doesn't affect the layout. We simply open up the cell's height so that we could drag in our elements and see visually what it looks like. That height here doesn't affect the actual height when we run the application. Okay? Okay, cool. So the first thing we want to drag in is an image view. Let's go ahead and drag in an image view. So search for image view. We drag in an image view. We go to our size inspector, and we resize our image view to be 100 by 100, right? 100 by 100, press enter. So this is our image view, 100 by 100. Cool. Next, we get a label. We drag our label over, center it vertically of the cell's height. I drag my trailing to my margin. I drag my leading to the image view. Great. We work on the constraints for the label first. So this label, we called it country description. So country description. I go to add new constraints for my country description. I set it at 8 to the trailing edge, so 8 points to the trailing edge, right? And 8 points to my image view. So 8 points to trailing, 8 points to my image view, and I add two constraints. Okay. Next up, actually, let's delete. Sorry, delete the 8 points to the trailing for the image view. So right here, delete the one that says leading space to image view. Just delete that one for now. So the only thing we have now is 8 points to the trailing. Okay, cool. Next up, I want to horizontally, not horizontally, I want to vertically align or center vertically my country description. So click on the country, click on country description, go to the align button, and we want to vertically center our country description. So click on vertically center country description. Add one constraint. Great. Next, let's go over to the image view. So to review, my country description right now has 2 constraints. To review, my country description label has 2 constraints. One to trailing of the super view and one center vertically. Next, we'll go to our image view. We'll click on our image view. We'll go to our add new constraints button. I'll click on the width is 100. The height is 100. Width 100, height 100. I'll set my leading to 8. Go ahead. The label, what we done with the label? I don't think we're completely done. Let me double check 1 second. So for the label, you have 2 constraints for now, right? One to the trailing and one center horizontally, correct? Not to the image view, center vertically to the super view, to the cell. Okay, cool. So for the image view, we have 8 to the lead-in, and we have width, and we have height. That's it for the image view for now. 3 constraints. Add 3 constraints. For the image view, we have lead-in at 8, we have width, and we have height for the image view. Cool? All right, next up, I want to say center my image view. I want to center my image view with my country description. How do I do that? I control drag from my image view over to my country description. So control drag from my image view over to my country description. And what do we select here? We select center vertically. So now the 2 of them will be centered with each other. So make sure we are selecting center vertically. At this point, my image view has been constrained correctly. Right? It's all blue here. My country description is also constrained correctly here. I could set one more constraint on my country description. Click on your country description. Go back to add new constraints. And for country description, set the lead-in to 8. The leading to 8. So it's going to be 8 spaces or 8 points between the image view and the country description. 8 points. And add 1 constraint. Cool? Great. Next up, we have our label. We have one more label here, so grab our next label. Add a label right over our country description. And go ahead and get an image view as well. Get an image view. And somewhat resize it. We'll go to the inspector to resize it better. So click on that second image and let's resize our second image. So the second image, which is the flag image, click on it and let's go to the size inspector. And for the width, we'll make it 40, and for the height, we'll make it 30. That looks about right. Okay, good. Great. So now let's go ahead and drag our image view somewhat center here with the label. And the label, we'll rename it country name. Country name. And let's set some constraints for the country name. So click on country name, click on Add New Constraints. So for country name, we'll make it 8 points from the image view, 8 points from the country descriptions top. We'll make it 8 points from the top of the super view, and we'll add those 3 constraints. All right, so at this point, the label is good. We'll do one modification to it later after we do the image. So let's go ahead and do the last image view. So you could reposition it to about where we want it to be, about center here, and to the margins, right? So let's go ahead and set the constraints for this image view. Click on your image view, click on Add New Constraints. So for the image view, we'll say the width is 40, so click on width. The height is 30, click on 30. And we'll make it 8 points to the trailing. So 8 points to the trailing, not to the top. That's going to break the constraints. 8 points to the trailing. So right now we have 3 constraints: width, height, and trailing. Say that again. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So let's update this. So here, this is 8 points, right? So 8 points from the trailing edge, and the width and the height. And add 3 constraints. Great. And lastly, for the image view, we'll center it 8 to the trailing of the super view. 8. And the width and the height. The width was 40 and the height is 30 of the image view. 3 constraints, correct. And for the image view, we'll click on the image view. We'll control drag from the image view over to the country name. Control drag over from the image view to the country name. And here we went to center vertically. So we want both to be centered with each other. So click on center vertically. And at this point, as we saw, we have all blue for our image view. And last constraint for the country name, click on country name. Click on country name. Go to our add new constraints. And right for our leading, the leading edge, so make sure you click on the leading I-beam here. Update it to 8. What's that? Sorry, trailing. Just correct me if I'm saying the wrong thing here. So this is trailing edge. So the trailing edge of my country name is now the leading of the image view. Cool? So this is trailing here. This is the trailing of my name. And this is the leading of my image view. There'll be 8 points apart from it. And I add 1 constraint. Yes, question?
So for our country description, because we said that is what
exactly. So we need to make sure, exactly. We need to make sure the lines is 0. The number of lines to 0. I don't think we've done that yet. A height.
We don't put a height because the height is going to vary based on
Exactly. If we put a height, it's going to break the cell size in cells. Okay. So we need a couple more things to do there. Thank you, Tiffany, for bringing that up. So click on your country description. Now we go to Attributes Inspector for the country description. This is a very important part of it. So click on your country description, go to Attributes Inspector, and make sure lines here, the lines number is 0. Make sure your lines number is 0, okay? 0 because we do not want to explicitly say 1. If we say 1, our cell height won't grow. If we say 3, our cell height won't grow if it's 10 lines. Everybody with me? So we say 0, that way it's dynamically it grows in height. Next up for the image view, click on your image view. Click on your image view, the country image view, and change aspect fit to aspect fill for the image view. So that the image, even if the image is lower than the height of the image view, it will take up the entire image view. We don't want our circle to have a small image inside of it. So aspect fill fills the entire frame of the image view. Aspect fit just fits based on the aspect ratio of the photo into the image view. So if it doesn't take the entire photo, meaning if it's in landscape, it will just be like a small strip in our image view. Yes? For country name.
So is that actually space
It,
as well as leave space for flag image view, medium space. So why do we need to set it from both sides?
let's see. We only did one, right? You'll see two because it also has that constraint on it. Like even if I put it this way, if I say I'm 8 feet away from you, you also 8 feet away from me. That's why like right now, if I'm looking at your constraints, I'll see 8 feet away from me.
Okay, so I said one.
But you'll see two. Exactly. So Yulia's question was like, why do we see two constraints on both views? Because that view also has a relation to you. You have a relation to it. Cool? Very good. All right, so here, the last thing we need to do was, first of all, we need to set up our cell. Click on your cell. Let's change the class's name. Also important. Click on your cell, and let's go to the identity inspector of the cell. So click on your cell, go to the identity inspector. Part of today's lecture is custom cells. We create custom cells by changing the default class from UI table view cell to our custom cells name. We created a custom cell. What's the name of it? Country cell. So here for the class, we put in country cell. Make sure you press enter. This is very, very, very important. If you press enter here, inherit module from target gets activated. Putting country cell in Xcode by itself is not enough. You need to press enter to commit that change. Everybody with me? That could cause an error. Okay? So make sure you press enter and make sure this activates. Okay, do we have a reuse identifier? Click on my cell, go to attributes inspector. We do have a reuse identifier. This is good. So now let's get access to our cell. So option click on your cell's name, country cell here, to bring it up. So that's what we need. We need access to our cell, so we wire it up to our class cell, so that we wire it up to our storyboard. Does everybody have access to their cell class? Yes, sir. Yes.
I thought of the constraints or anything with the problems on the label title for the name, like it's like slightly above the UI image.
This label name, you mean?
Yeah.
As long as it's set to 8 for now, you should be okay. Okay? We'll see if anything breaks as we run the app. Okay, so now let's just drag. Basically, you're dragging now. So drag from your country name image over to your image. Drag from your country name label over to your country name label. Drag from your description label over to your description label. And lastly, drag from your country flag image over to your country flag. So we have 4 UI elements. At this point, I'll run my app and verify if we have anything broken that we need to fix. Again, cell sizing could be tricky. The one thing we missed could break our constraints. So let's see what we have. I haven't connected my table view. How do we find that out? Well, it crashed right on my table view. Right, everybody? I haven't connected my table view, so it crashed right on my table view. What's the error? It says, unexpectedly found nil while trying to wrap on an optional. Now, pay attention here. When you see a crash like that, that's a good crash, right? Because mostly it's very easy to fix that crash. Because Xcode is telling us it was trying to unwrap a value, and it found nil. And it's also crashing on the thing that's nil. The thing that's nil is my table view. Why is it nil? Because I haven't connected, as Cameron says. I haven't connected my table view to my view controller. Okay? It tells us here, unexpectedly found nil, right? So it was trying to say table view that reload data, and that's nil. I cannot call reload data on a nil object, so the app crashes. So let's go ahead and fix that. If you did yours, great, but let me connect mine explicitly here. So get to my storyboard. So we need access to our first scene, and we need to get access to our country list controller. And make sure that you connect your table view over to your scene. Everybody? Have we done that? Have we done that? Okay, cool. Run the app again. The bad errors is when you don't get enough information from Xcode, but an error like that, you get information because something is nil, you're trying to unwrap it. Okay, so if we did everything correctly, we should have our UI appearing like we have on screen. Yulia, do you have yours? And as we scroll down, we should see all the cells are different. They're different heights. If we look at Jamaica, Jamaica is different from the United States, different heights. If we look at Dominican Republic, it might be one of the tallest cells. Do we see that? Right? Because it was able to resize itself based on its contents. And every cell, we're able to see all the contents of the description label. Do we see that? Right? So lastly, before we go to the next step, let's go ahead and update our United States font and our description font. Like we did earlier, let's go ahead and do it again. So how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we get access to the styles font? We clicked on, for example, we clicked on country image. We clicked on country image, we went to attributes inspector, and we clicked on our text label here. Everybody, make sure you click on your country label, country name, right? Go to the font area. Are we all in the font area? Cassandra? And we click on the text here, and we change it to headline. So headline will be the country name, and sub-headline will be the description. Everybody with me? So click on this here. Comes up at some point. Click on where it says font system, and get access to the text styles. Text styles, the class of text styles is UI font text styles. The only thing we're interested in right now is Apple, again, highly recommends that your fonts be dynamic type ready. Meaning when the user goes to their settings and they want a bigger font, your app automatically renders a bigger font. If we stick to the default system 17, it's a hard-coded number, right? It's a hard-coded number. When I say I want to increase my font, that size doesn't change, okay? So get in the habit of using one of those text styles, whichever text style you prefer, whichever one works for your UI. Use one of those text styles, and then with that, you get dynamic type for free. Dynamic type meaning the font increases or decreases based on the user's preference. Yes, thank you. Yeah, you could have your custom font, but if you want it to be accessible, right, you have to use what's called UI font, what's it called? UI font metrics. UI font metrics, right, to return as the user is changing the font size on your custom font to make it increase. So there's a bit of code you have to do, not much, maybe like 2 lines of code that your custom font needs to adhere to in order for it to be accessible. Cool? Does that help you? Okay. There was the next question. Yes?
I people this morning saying that my country
Is unreachable?
yeah.
You haven't dragged from the cell. Control drag from the cell to the detail. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and add our text style. So we said for the country name, we'll say headline. And for the country description, we said we will make it, for the country description, we said we'll make it subheadline, right? Subhead. Cool. All right, great. So let's run our app again, verify that change. How many of us created our prepare for segue? Very good. You guys were able to pass data? Excellent. This is half of Friday's assessment. Very, very good. All right, great. So now we have Nigeria, Bangladesh appears to be the headline. Everybody with me? Right? And then our sub-headline, again, we could scale it up or down. We saw what that looked like earlier or later, right? We could dynamically change it up and down. So if the user, you don't have to do that part, but if your user was to go to settings of the app, if your user was to go to the settings of the app and go to accessibility and go to display text size and go to larger text size, turn that on and say 40 years from now, I can't see anything. I go all the way up, right? I go up here. I go back to your nice app. I'm trying to see words. I click on it. And this scales up, right? So this is the maximum I am allowed to watch. I could probably still take out my magnifying glass at this point. But this has grown up to as much as you have. Everybody with me? So we're able to dynamically change the font size based by the user's preference. Let me go back here. Take it back to the default value. I go back to my app. And it's already rendered back to the default value. Great. So next step is when I click on a cell, I want to segue and pass in the country, right? So let's see what that looks like. Some of us got to that point. We did it already, which is great. But let's do it together. First part of it, make sure you control drag from the cell over to your second view controller. Everybody? Make sure you control drag from your cell. Well, make sure you select the cell. Control drag over to your second view controller. And we're selecting show. Show is a push segue. It pushes the new view controller onto the stack. Okay, make sure that your second view controller does say country detail view controller or country detail controller. Great. Okay. Country. Come up. Okay, so make sure that you have your image view connected and make sure that you have your description label connected for the second view controller. Everybody? And let me just close that out so we have more space here. Okay. Our country detail view looks like this. We have two, we have a label, and we have an image view. We have the country. We need the object coming from the custom, from the country list controller. We have our view load calling our update UI, and our update UI basically updates the navigation title. You could also, instead of saying navigation title, keep that in mind, you could also say navigation item. You could also say navigation item dot title, right? Because we have a navigation bar. Remember the navigation bar has a navigation item on it. We could also say navigation item dot title. But every view controller has a title. We could also say title equal to some title. Just note those two things exist. Now let's go back and do the hard work or the easy work, depending on how we see it. So if we go to our country list controller, right after our viewDid load, I'm in the country list controller. Right after the viewDid load, I want to pass an object. I want to go ahead and say prepare for segue. Prepare for segue. What does prepare for segue do again? Andy, what does prepare for segue do? Prepare for segue. What does it do? Why do we need it? The main objective of Prepare for Segue, right, is to get the destination view controller and to set the required objects properties on that controller. Everybody with me? The only reason why we override this function, because we could segue. right? We could segue. Can we segue? We should be able to segue already. Let's run the app and let's see what happens. So we're running our application. We could segue because we connected them already. Do we agree? So if I click on my cell, I could segue. But look at that. It's going to crash the app. What does our crash say? Couldn't get a country value. Verify, prepare for segue. It's a good error. Right? We wrote that ourselves. We said if this crashes, that means your prepare for segue function hasn't gotten set up. If it did get set up, you haven't set the object in the prepare for segue. So again, the big part of prepare for segue, the one reason why we use it is to be able to set the property that we go into. We want to set our country. We want to set the country we go into. Everybody with me? Any questions about that? Again, this is a big part of Friday. Oh, why am I not able to get my object from the second view controller? Oh, maybe your prepare for segue never set that object. Right? So let's go back to our prepare for segue here and set the object. First, we need to get the destination controller. We get it by using optional unwrapping and using typecasting. So here we say let country detail controller equal to segue. Remember, segue is the way we access the destination or the source. Everybody? On my segue, I say destination. Some of us make a mistake. We say description here. Be careful. Make sure you say destination. Destination is a UI view controller. I want to cast it to the type I expect. The type I expect is a country detail controller. Everybody with me? Any questions before we move on? Then I say here, Then I say here, if it's not that view controller, crash the app. We should not continue at this point. So here I'm going to put a fatal error saying country detail controller failed to be configured. Country detail controller, and I also say index path because we need index path here. So one of those things failed. Right? Great. Yes, sir. Returning empty doesn't give us any information. Because at this point, we returned and we said, so once question was, why can't we simply, like we did before, again, we said we had a to-do. If you simply say return, that doesn't give you any information about if something went wrong. Everybody with me? That's a silent return. Get in the habit of not just having a return in your God statement. Have a print statement. Have anything to let you, the developer, know something went wrong. In our case, the best thing to do is to crash the app. Okay? So here, we say fatal error, meaning one of those things did not get set. Or our country detail view controller, there's something wrong. Something went wrong somewhere. So, that's not all we need. We need a detail controller. We need access to the detail controller. So again, step one, we need a reference to the country detail controller. And also, we need to know what cell got selected, right? So, which index path got selected, so we can retrieve the country at the index path. So not only do we need the country detail controller reference, but we also need the index path that was selected, right? We also need the index path that was selected. And how do we get the index path? Yulia, how do we get the index path? Using the table view. How do we get the index path of the selected row? We have our table view. The table view knows what cell got selected. it has a method on it called index path, right, for selected row. Or rather a property on it called index path for selected row. And that returns us the index path. On the table view, we have a table view property, right? Our table view property is here, right? Here, right? On that table view, we could say, hey, get me the thing that was just selected. Because something was selected. That's why we actually segue it. So get me the thing, get me the index path that was selected, return it to me. It's optional. That's why we use a guard statement to unwrap it. So we unwrap two things here. First, we unwrap the country detail controller, and we also unwrap the index path. Those are two pieces of information we need. The first is the reference. The second is the index path so that we could get the country. And with the country, we will use the index path to get the selected country. Then we will set the country detail controller dot country. Right, so you could say 3 and 4. Cool. All right, so we need to get a country. How do we get a country? Bienvenido, how do we get a country here? Using our continents. Why section and row? Okay, so Bienvenido says that a section has rows, right? We agree? So we have an array of arrays, so we need to get access to the index path dot section first, right? That outer array, and then we get access to the actual row in that section by index path dot row. So that gets us a country. Now we have a country. Are we done? We're not done, because we also need to use the country detail view controller here to set its country. Without setting the country here, it's going to be nil. So this needs to be set. Okay, very important. This is all we're after. At the end of the day, all what we needed to do is to achieve this line 51. We did all that work to achieve line 51. Line 51 actually sets the object that we go into. Questions about that? Questions about that? Where are we going to? Where are we going to, Luba? Where are we going to? When we click on the cell, where are we going to? When we click on the cell, where are we going to? When we click on this cell here, it takes us to what? To the detail controller, correct? And once we get to the detail controller, there's a country object there. If we do not set the country object, our app will crash because it needs to get set somewhere before it gets on screen. Everybody with me? Okay, cool. So at this point, we could actually run our app and test it out. So if I select India, for example, it segues to India. It segues to India. Our description is a bit off there. We need to fix that. But it segues correctly. I do see my image. If I go back, if I pop my view from the stack, I go back to, say, Nepal, I also get an image of Nepal. Okay, questions? Let's fix our description constraints. Let's go back to our storyboard. Our description constraints is off here. And that's the last. Zero line is one thing. And also I want to give trailing and leading. Where is it? Come back to me, sir. Xcode is so troublesome nowadays. All right, so let's set up the constraints. Let's fix the constraints for our label. I'll click on Add New Constraints. Again, only the label here. I'll say 8 points from the lead-in, 8 points from the trailing. I'll add those two constraints. Don't I have more constraints on this? Why is it red? I thought I had that already. Let's see. It disappeared, I guess. Is my image view good? Okay. So for the label, as Tiffany said, we just need to set the top of the label to the bottom of the image view. So this is going to be 8 points for now, or 20. Let's make 20. So 20 to the top. And add one constraint. Great. And lastly, again, as Tiffany pointed out, we want the label to be 1 or 0. How many lines do I need? For my label, how many lines? Should I keep it at 1 or make it 0? Make it 0. 0, right? Because we want the description to grow with the label. Everybody with me? So click on your label and make sure your attributes inspector for the label, for your label, make sure it says 0. Okay? And let's run our app again. Yes, sir. For what? Prepare for segue. 1 second. Let's verify that this works, and then we'll go back to prepare for segue. Again, 3 constraints for your label: top, lead-in, trailing. If I go, let's see other countries here. Give some other countries some love. Let's go to Ecuador. Ecuador renders correctly. I see everything for Ecuador. Let's see Martinique. That also renders correctly. I see all the descriptions for Martinique. Right, so everything works correctly as advertised here. What's your question, sir? Index paths. So let's go back to detail. Let's go back to prepare for segue. Yes. What's your question? We've done it 5 times. The other time is you have to create that GitHub app. Did you create it? No. Okay, so that's part of it, right? Creating that app, that way you get used to writing your own code, right? Because doing what we did in class doesn't really help unless you go outside of it. We have labs to cover it. We have a lab today, we'll have a lab tomorrow, a lab Wednesday. But really it's important to get used to this, like knowing what's happening there. Yes, Tanya? Okay, step 1. We need to get, okay, don't go to step 1. This guy.
Yes. So when you go to the place where it's sampling, how do you refer to what you sent there? Is this
part 1 is country. It's a public property. So that's why I'm able to say country DC dot country. And then on my country detail controller, this is the property that I'm setting. Everybody, on my detail controller, this is the property I'm setting. So the minute I come here, right, this property gets set. It's set already. That's where I could go to my update UI. It's no longer a nil value, right? It's no longer nil. So I'm able to come in and set up my UI. If it's nil, it crashes right here. Okay, everybody? If you do not do this step here, country detail country, right? The object is nil in the detail controller. Any questions before we stop our lecture here? I think we are done with this part of it. Any questions? Any questions? Yes. The label I did for the last one, for the detail controller. Okay, so the label for our detail controller is something like this. It's only top, it's top of the bottom of the image view. It's leading at 8, and it's trailing at 8. So only 3 constraints. And we said label number of lines is 0. Cool? Did you get number of lines to 0? All right. I want to talk about one more thing, right? just give us a hint of our Game of Thrones. So Game of Thrones, you could use the same layout we have, right? Currently, I have one prototype cell. Everybody with me? I could have two prototype cells. When my second prototype cell, let's take a look at what I'm talking about. Are we paying attention? Maybe, maybe not. My second prototype cell, so what do? I click on my table view. I click on my table view, everybody. I go to where it says prototype cells. Do we see where it says prototype cells? I increase the amount to 2. And look at that, we got 2 cells now. Everybody? But my second cell, I need to change the identifier. I'll change the identifier of my second cell. Click on my cell, make sure my cell has a... The reuse identifier cannot be the same as the first one, obviously. So maybe this one you call right cell. Maybe you call this one right cell. The second one, maybe you call it right cell. Why do you call it right cell? Because now, let's take out the constraints here for this guy. Clear constraints. Clear constraints. I'll give you guys a hint, and that should be enough to get you going. Clear constraints and clear constraints. So this is what it looks like. So you have a left guy and you have a right guy, right? Everybody? Everybody. So that's all it is. You're repositioning your constraints. So based on your logic in your cell for row, based on your logic in your cell for row, you will be able to toggle between the cells. So you have one cell here which is left and one cell which is right. Maybe. Yeah, I am. All right, everybody, this is what it looks like. You have a table view, you have 2 cells, 2 prototype cells. Everybody with me? 2 different identifiers. The first identifier will identify the first cell as a left cell, for example. The second identifier will identify the cell as a right cell. In your cell for row, that's where you do the rest of the logic. The coding part of it is done in your cell for row. In your cell for row, you could say, if my section is even, give me the left cell. If my section is odd, give me the right cell. Any questions about that? I mean the identifier, or the layout, sorry. But you have to give it the identifier.
No, that's fine, but when you see it in your actual,
on the device?
on the device, on the simulator, it's going to show it like that. So if 0, 0 meaning Nigeria would show it like that, then 1 meaning, Asia, it will show it on the opposite side.
Exactly.
And in that back and forth from that one.
Exactly. But I want us to take care of the logic because, right, that's a good challenge for you guys. Yes, but it's based on odd or even, right? It alternates between odd and even. So if my section is 0, it's going to use left. If it's right, it uses... Yeah, for the entire section. Yes. Any questions before we start? Use the mod operator. Again, I told us. Mod operator, right? So if I say section mod 2 and it's 0, then that's even. I probably return the right cell. It's just an if else, but based on the mod operator on the cell, on the section in your cell for row. Cool? Any questions before we start? So we're able to self-resize our cell, right? We're able to segue, right? All part of Friday, being able to pass data and see this beautiful country. Oh my God, where is this? Oh, right, this is my home country. Right? So we were able to do that, right? We were able to segue past data over. We were able to even do a self-resizing cell. We were able to do a lot of things. We even saw dynamic type today. So you could say you saw dynamic type as well. All right, so I'll end here. Thank you.